Hello, I'm Bob Weir with the Cross Timbers Gazette, and my guest today is Bill Ray, who is running for a seat on the Court of Appeals for the 2nd Appellate District of Texas. Thank you for being here, Mr. Ray.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Weir.
And the Court of Appeals is composed of 7 justices and has jurisdiction over appeals from district and county courts in 12 north central Texas counties, and one of them is Denton County. So I'm going to ask you to begin with, what are the qualifications, Mr. Ray, to be on the Court of Appeals?
To be eligible to sit as a judge on the Court of Appeals, you have to be licensed for 10 years as an attorney. You have to live in one of those counties. You have to be registered to vote. And there are other qualifications, like you can't be convicted of a felony in order to be on the court. But basically, you got to be a lawyer. You got to live there.
And you are a criminal defense attorney?
That's correct. I started out, I was licensed in 1985. I was a briefing attorney at the Court of Criminal Appeals, which is in Austin. I did that for a year. From there, I got a job at the Tarrant County Criminal District Attorney's Office. I worked there 3.5 years, and I've been in private practice since January 1st of 1990, which is a little over 25 years. And 26 years, excuse me.
I know you have other opponents in this race. Are you the only criminal defense attorney?
I believe that's correct. Mr. Andy Porter, who's one of the candidates in the race, he's a prosecutor. Dabney Bassel is a civil appellate attorney. Mary Jondro and Elizabeth Kerr are also with civil firms. So I think I'm probably the only one that's ever practiced criminal defense work.
And the fact that you're a criminal defense attorney, how is that relevant to this position?
Well, it's relevant for a couple of reasons. Number one, and this is not necessarily the case in all the courts of appeals, but in this particular Court of Appeals, about 53% of the cases that were filed in fiscal year 2015 are criminal cases. So the majority, not a strong majority, but the majority of the cases that are filed there are criminal cases. The court has 7 justices, and on different courts of appeals in the state there are different numbers of justices on the court. It's basically based on population. Some have as few as 3, and I believe Dallas has the most, which I could be mistaken, but it has 9. But when you have cases that involve persons in jail, society has a need, and justice has a need to get those cases resolved as quick as possible. These judges on this court, depending on which one you look at, some of them issue between 80 and 90 opinions a year. This is not a court that goofs off. The Second Court of Appeals actually has the highest clearance rate for criminal cases. In fiscal year 2015, they cleared 122%, which means they're cutting their backlog. I believe it's the 2nd highest rate for civil cases statewide.
And how long is the term of office?
Terms are 6 years, and they are staggered. And obviously, with 7 justices, you're not going to have an even number every time. But everybody runs on a 6-year term, and then they run for re-election. Justice Ann Gardner, who's the current judge in this position, she just did not seek re-election, so it became an open seat. If no one had filed, the governor would have appointed someone, and that person in a gubernatorial appointment has to stand for re-election at the next general election, and then they go back to the normal term of whatever seat that is. The seats don't change. In other words, the terms. This seat runs every 6 years, regardless of who's in it.
Right. And what type of cases come before this court?
All criminal appeals from district and county courts and civil cases, and I believe you said that it's $250 in excess of that. So if you have a case that comes from a Justice of the Peace Court, the final result on that's going to be the county court at law, typically. But all criminal cases, and of course traffic tickets cases, stop at the county court as well. So you have to have a reason to get a traffic case to the Court of Appeals. I've actually had one, but there was a direct legal issue that was involved. So they can get there, but there has to be. It's kind of a. It doesn't happen very much. Let me just put it that way.
So, as I understand it, other than death penalty cases, if someone is convicted of a felony, let's say in Denton County, their attorney can appeal to this Second Court of Appeals, which may or may not overturn the conviction.
That is correct. When a person's sentenced, the time starts running when a person's sentenced, or in a civil case when the judgment's actually signed. It's the same formality. You have 30 days to file a notice of appeal. The defendant or the losing party in the civil case, could be the plaintiff, they file a notice of appeal with the trial court. Has to be done within 30 days. Then the Court of Appeals gets the case, they order briefing typically, and then they render a decision. It can be anywhere from as little as 90 to 120 days. I've had one go as long as 3 years.
And what would be a reason for overturning a criminal conviction, for example?
Well, there are a couple of different places that cases tend to get overturned. In a criminal case, you cannot get a sentence overturned based solely on the fact that the verdict might have been too high. In other words, if a person got 80 years and you appeal, and your appeal is that sentence was too large, that's not going to get you an appeal. It has to be a legal issue that you received an adverse ruling from the trial judge. And an example would be if a person gave a statement to the police after he was arrested, and that statement was not admissible for some legal reason, but the trial judge admitted it in front of the jury, then that might get the case reversed. The defendant has to show harm. In other words, he can't just say, okay, the police didn't read me my Miranda warnings, which is what a lot of people say. That error has to contribute to the reason the person got convicted. Right. So the fact that the judge allows a hearsay statement, which is an objectionable thing, allows a hearsay statement in front of the jury, that's not going to necessarily get you a new trial. It probably doesn't. I've never seen a case reversed on appeal for that reason. It has to be a legal reason, and it has to be a reason that contributed to the verdict being the way it was.
All right. In the event that the court upholds the conviction, what's the next court that the defendant can appeal to? Well,
actually, the court could uphold the conviction or could reverse the conviction, and you're still in the same situation. What I mean by that is when you get to the appellate system, the appellate court rules, either affirming the conviction or reversing the conviction, then whoever's the losing party there can appeal it. So in other words, let's say that the defendant lost and his conviction was affirmed, he would appeal to the Court of Criminal Appeals. If the Court of Appeals reversed the decision of the trial court, the state could then appeal and go to the Court of Criminal Appeals.
Oh,
so the Court of Criminal Appeals hears states' appeals as well as defendants' appeals. It's called a petition for discretionary review. In a civil case, it's called a petition for review. Just the word discretionary is not in there.
And as far as civil appeals, if the judgment exceeds $250, a defendant can appeal the judgment to have it reduced. What would be some of the reasons for reducing the size of a judgment in a civil case?
Well, first of all, there are basically two different kinds of damages. You have compensatory damages, and then you have punitive damages in civil cases. Compensatory damages include the damages to pain and suffering, lost wages, that sort of thing. Punitive damages are to punish the defendant because he had a bad product or whatever. There's a formula that allows and that requires that punitive damages can't exceed a certain multiplication factor of the compensatory damages, and the juries don't know that when they assess the dollar amount, so you can appeal and get that set aside generally pretty quickly.
Well, the last thing I just would add is what type of campaigning will you be doing for this position?
All right. Well, what I'm doing is I've already put out one mailer, and I have a copy of it here, and I'll leave it with you. It just has my information that you might want to look at, address and that sort of thing. I'm having a fundraiser at Michael's Cuisine on the 14th, which is a week from tomorrow night. It's on the west side of Fort Worth. I have a direct mail planned to go out to whatever that fundraiser and whatever I can afford. And we're also working on some advertisements in some newspapers.
Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Ray, for being here for this interview, and I wish you the best of luck in the campaign. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching.